Tonight, liberal journalists are outraged that I reported on the Muslim migrant who was convicted of serial rape in Montreal. I'll tell you why. It's January 15th, and you're watching the Ezra Levant Show.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government for why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
I'm so troubled by the story we covered yesterday, the Muslim migrant who was convicted of assaulting and extorting and raping 10 teenage girls in Montreal. I want to touch on it again today, but I want to put it in a greater context to show you how it's just a detail of a larger picture that is troubling me greatly these days. To recap, Wahid Mustafa Chaloub is a Muslim migrant to Canada, came here a few years ago from Africa, who is still a foreign citizen. He was convicted this week of the most horrific serial rapes I've heard of in Canada since Paul Bernardo. 10 teenage girls. He trapped them, got them drunk and drugged them. He raped them, he filmed them, threatened to expose those sex tapes on the internet, threatened their family, extorted them, threatened to burn their parents' houses down if these girls told anyone, made them sign bizarre contracts, teenage girls, to psychologically manipulate them, to make them think they had to submit to his rapes or to pay him thousands of dollars in the alternative. Pay him. It's the most depraved rape slavery I've ever heard of in Canada. 10 teenage girls. And yet it was not reported, this sentence and conviction. Not reported outside of Quebec. A Paul Bernardo-style serial rapist, no one reported it outside Quebec. I thought we were in an age of feminism, where we were supposed to be against rape culture, and where we were supposed to be so sensitive to trigger warnings about any imagined sexism. And when we have the cruelest rapes, we're quiet, if it's a certain ethnic group involved. The whole country's political class is talking about missing and murdered Aboriginal women, many of whom were raped. It is something to definitely talk about, absolutely, but why the silence when it's not Aboriginal women, when it's merely white women who were groomed and exploited and extorted by a Muslim migrant? This hits me hard because I've just spent a week looking at the cover-up of mass sexual assaults in Europe. 1,000 Muslim men in Cologne, Germany, swarming 500 different women on New Year's Eve, groping, robbing, sexually assaulting, raping. It's a shocking crime, but even more shocking was the cover-up. The Cologne Police Department put out a false press release the next day saying the New Year's Eve was uneventful and, quote, relaxed. That's what they said. The mayor of Cologne said that the problem was with German women who needed a new code of conduct, she called it, and that those silly girls, if only they'd stayed a, quote, arm's length away from the Muslim men, they'd have been fine. Seriously, she criticized the women for not staying away from their assaulters. What happened there in Cologne is called Taharush. It's so common in Muslim countries, it has its own name. Here is a terrifying image from Egypt of Taharush, a screaming woman being taken underground into a subway station to be groped and raped en masse by 100 Muslim men. It's what they do, especially to women not wearing hijabs or niqabs. And since the Cologne cover-up, news has trickled out from so many other European cities of cover-ups in their towns too. 4 Muslim migrants sexually harassing girls in Austria, and police refused to do anything for months out of political correctness. Young Muslim men going into public swimming pools and raping German girls. Seriously, these Muslim migrants come from a culture where a woman not covering herself from head to toe, well, those women are considered dirty. The word in Arabic is halal. So imagine they go into a place where beautiful women are wearing bikinis and where the police aren't around and no one has the courage to stop them from raping because they don't want to be called racist. Those 2 stories are just from the past couple days. Look at this absurd video. I'm going to let it play for a minute because it takes a moment to realize just how crazy it is what I'm showing you, what you're looking at. It is a Muslim man on the street, in public, molesting a mannequin, a dummy for women's clothes in a store. He's kissing it, he's groping it. Seriously, he's in public, and he's getting his rocks off on some plastic white woman in a store. Now, you watch this for a few first seconds, and it's hilarious. Maybe it's a joke. No, it's not a joke. And then it continues, and it moves from hilarious to bizarre and sad. And then finally you think, this guy when he's done molesting this mannequin, will now continue to walk through his city. Imagine being a woman he comes into contact with, a real woman. Imagine how he would treat any woman he sees that he could get away with groping, not just on the street in public, but say if he was in a public swimming pool or in a classroom or in an apartment or a private room. And then imagine 50,000 unvetted Muslim migrants from this rape culture coming to Canada. And imagine millions having already come to Germany. 1.1 million Muslim migrants to Germany last year alone. 75% of them young men. Why would you deliberately allow such a gender imbalance? Are you asking for rapes? And so when we broke the news this week that the RCMP is bringing in an official hijab uniform, do you see the bigger picture here that's coming together now? We're officially grafting onto our secular police force a flag of political Islam, the hijab. We're changing our culture of equality of women and replacing it with a culture where women are expected to cover up, to be subordinate, or to be considered dirty, haram. So much for the separation of mosque and state. Imagine if a Catholic nun demanded to wear her nun's habit in a police uniform. We'd all laugh. But a Muslim hijab? Oh, sure. Yeah, come aboard. We do this a lot. Here's that famous picture of the Valley Park Middle School, a public school in Toronto, where each Friday, this public school, paid for by taxpayers, hands over its cafeteria to a Muslim imam to run as a mosque. And it's gender segregated, gender apartheid. Boys in the front, of course, they're dominant. They're better than girls in Islam. Then the girls behind them, of course, they're inferior under Sharia law. And then the third rank of girls, way in the back, girls who are having their period. So they're considered dirty or haram in Islam. Could you imagine a Catholic priest taking over a public school's cafeteria for a Catholic religious service and then gender segregating the children and asking the girls if they're on their periods and telling them to sit in the far back if they were? Some pervy old man asking young girls about their menstrual cycles. It would never happen. It could never happen. Separation of church and state, equality of the sexes, human rights. Oh, but it's not a priest, though. It's a Muslim imam, so no problem. So all this is in my mind at once. The mass rapes, the taharush, as it's called, moving from Arabia to Europe, the cover-ups by the press and the politicians in Germany and elsewhere, and now 50,000 Syrians being rushed to Canada, no vetting. As Brian Lilly revealed, we asked the Liberal government for a copy of their questionnaire for Syrian migrants, what they're checking, what they're asking. We know they don't screen for things like ideology, like a belief in the equality of men and women, a belief in the separation of mosque and state, of the equality of all religion in the public square. We know they don't sort the wolves from the lambs, but they won't even answer our most basic questions about the vetting. They're stonewalling. Liberal government is hiding something, and the media, who claim to care about such things as transparency under Harper, who claim to care about access to information, they don't really care, because this is about Islam, so they let it go. Which brings me back to last night. Last night I did the show on Walid Mustafa Chaloub, the serial rapist who was convicted and sentenced. He's a torturer, really. Actually, the most accurate phrase is a rape slaver. That's what it's described as in the Quran, the most depraved rape case I've heard of since Paul Bernardo. And not a peep about this conviction outside of Quebec. And even in the Montreal Gazette, just a very small story hidden inside the paper. So I rolled this video out last night, as you know, and I tweeted it on Twitter, and several journalists, white liberal journalists, replied to me. Did they say, hey, interesting story? Did they say, hey, good scoop? Did they say, we're going to follow up on the story? Did they say, Ezra, you got your facts wrong? No. I mean, those are all possible things for journalists to say, or they could ignore me, which they do most of the time. But these journalists were actually anti-journalists last night. They condemn me. They claim that the story really shouldn't be national news, or that I'm not credible, even though the facts may be true, I shouldn't talk about it. Here's Murdoch Davis, former senior executive for various Canadian newspapers. He wrote, Ezra, not many rape cases are national news. CBC and CTV reported the case. Maybe didn't get the memo about his religion. So a few things here. He says the CBC and CTV reported on the case, but that's not true. They didn't cover the conviction and the sentence. Other than a small local story on the CBC website. They reported on the charges way back when. But then Murdoch excuses that rape decision. Not many rape, that decision, decision not to publish them. He says, not many rape cases are national news. Is that a fact? 10 teenage girls, rape, slavery, bizarre contracts, psychological manipulation by a Muslim migrant. That's not national news. Do you see my beef here? He's not ignoring the story. He's not adding to the story. He's condemning me for covering the story and for criticizing those who aren't. That's actually a form of anti-journalism. For uncomfortable things, don't talk about them. Murdoch Davis is actually a pretty good guy. I like him. He's a liberal who believes in free speech. I enjoy his comments even when he disagrees with me. I've invited him on this show to make his case. I'll let you know if he accepts. I'd like him to make his criticisms and answer my rebuttals. But my point remains, his only comments to me online were to try to rebut me and take the sting out of my reporters and to defend the journalism cone of silence over this story by other media. That's what he was talking about, but he was far from alone. Here's Claire Theobald from the Edmonton Sun. I had written that the media were silent on this, and she wrote right back and said, Ezra, just as you were silent when the Calgary police ruled out terrorism as a motive for the club shooting. Well, as viewers of our show know, we reported when the police said they were investigating terrorism as a possible motive in that Calgary bar shooting. We showed you the video of the police saying they were investigating terrorism. And then later, when police later said it wasn't terrorism, we put that in our very next show. But you see what she's saying? Besides getting her facts wrong, she's saying, sure, we're silent about Shaloub here at the Sun, but sure, we buried it. But Ezra, we have an excuse and we don't like you and you did something wrong, so don't blame us. I mean, her excuse was inaccurate, but even if it were accurate, she's explaining and justifying and supporting the decision of the Edmonton Sun to refrain from reporting on a horrific rape by a Muslim migrant. The Edmonton Sun, a tabloid that puts every crime story on the front page, why would they not cover this horrific serial rape? Because the criminal is a Muslim migrant. But my point here is, Theobald doesn't stay quiet, or she doesn't start reporting. She defends the Edmonton Sun's decision to cover the story up and tries to unsuccessfully attack me and my character as if that's some sort of excuse. One last example, Tasha Sheridan, a red Tory, chimed in too, saying, it's been on all the outlets, including the CBC and all over Quebec. Again, in my coverage last night, I listed the handful of Quebec media that did cover the story, and I showed you how small their coverage was. I don't think Sheridan actually watched my video, or she'd know that I mentioned those minor outlets. But again, do you see my point here? Horrific serial rape. And this feminist, Tasha Sheridan, is mad that I didn't mention the handful of Quebec media who did report on the conviction. So 3 journalists, all mainstream media, and all with the same reaction. Nitpick me, criticize me, rebut me, personalize it to me. But whatever you do, defend the cone of silence on the actual story. Express anger, not about the rape, but that I dared to report on the rape and that the other media didn't. Isn't that a strange thing for journalists to do? Not to be journalists, but to want other journalists to not journalize? That's weird. Hey guys, I think if you get laid off at your Canadian newspapers, which may well happen, there are probably some German newspapers in Cologne that really like your editorial judgment on what not to report. I think you can get some work there, you guys. Those same media voices who cheer unvetted Muslim migrants, who cheer multiculturalism, who call for open borders, then kick into cover-up mode when rape culture comes along with the migrants in Germany and now in Canada. Not a single mainstream media outlet that I have seen has picked up our scoop about the RCMP hijab. Of course not. They don't want to follow our lead, sure, but more to the point, they don't want to make a fuss. They love the hijab. Do I talk too much about foreign affairs on this show? I don't know, maybe. It's because Germany is a preview of what's coming here to Canada if we don't change course. Do I talk too much about Islam? Because understanding that political religion is key to understanding Islamic terrorism and cultural traditions like Taharish, rape gangs, rape slavery, misogyny. Maybe I should take a break from it all, eh? Maybe take a break from the Islam issue. Go somewhere nice, far away. Go to Vancouver, take a break. Yeah, that sort of sounds relaxing. Maybe I'll go shopping or something. Oh, hang on. Here's some pictures that the Vancouver police are circulating. Muslim men suspiciously taking videotape of a large shopping mall in Vancouver. The police are looking for tips to identify these men. Yeah, Vancouver shopping, maybe not, but you know, probably nothing to see here, right, Claire? Tasha? Murdoch? I mean, those Vancouver cops, they're probably just Islamophobes, right? Stay with us. More after these words.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know the Rebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to the rebel.media/store to find out more.
Welcome back. Well, as I've told you before, the case of Walid Mustafa Chaloub, the Muslim migrant to Quebec, who's been in Canada for almost 10 years, actually, but he's not become a citizen. He pled guilty to 24 counts of assaulting and raping and extorting 10 teenage girls. Reading the testimony was so graphic, I felt sick. It reminded me of the Paul Bernardo case, and yet, as I mentioned yesterday, I could see no coverage whatsoever outside of Quebec, and the coverage in Quebec was so minor and so modest. I thought, how can this be? Why is it this way? And my theory is that because he's a Muslim migrant, and that's uncomfortable for politically correct elites to talk about. Well, am I wrong? I mean, I'm here in Toronto, and I'm not in the Quebec scene, so let me ask someone who is, namely my friend Eric Duhaime, who's a popular radio host of FM 93. He joins us now via Skype from Quebec. Great to see you, Eric. Thanks for taking the time.
Always a pleasure, Ezra.
Well, thank you. The case of Mr. Chaloub, I was unfamiliar with it until very recently, and I have an excuse for that. It hasn't been covered in English Canada. How widely has this case been covered in the province of Quebec? Is it something that everyone's talking about, a modern version of Paul Bernardo, or has it been minimized in the media out there?
It's been minimized, Ezra, but honestly, almost all French media did talk about it. There was a mention almost everywhere because of the horrors that the victims have to face and all the contracts that he was trying to get them signed, and the whole strategy he had to attract his victims. That's been covered okay, I would say, in the French media, but you're right, it could have been much more. But and they also talked about the fact that he's facing deportation. That was another thing that was well mentioned in almost every story. But of course, there was no religious mention at all. That was not an issue for those who reported on that story.
Now, listen, I wouldn't reach for the religion of a convict naturally. I mean, listen, every religion, every race has its criminals. But in the wake of the mass sexual assaults from Muslim migrants in Europe, it's on my mind. And I think it's on the mind of all the journalists who said, well, let's downplay it because of that. So let me ask you.
Ezra?
Yeah.
You're not paranoid, because there's a well-known columnist in La Presse, which is the main French paper in Montreal, that wrote something about what happened in Germany and also with this Walid Mustafa Chaloub. What she's saying is going exactly in the way of what you're talking about. She says that there's a cultural misunderstanding currently, and that's the reason why we don't understand what happened in Germany and why we don't understand poor Walid today. It's because their perception of Arab men in the Muslim world is that the women in the Western world are basically sluts. And where does that perception comes from? Well, it's because of our porn industry here in the West that is diffusing an image of the women that is degrading, and unfortunately the Arab man understand that this is the norm and this is how sexually our women behave out here. So when they arrive here, there's a cultural misunderstanding, Ezra. I'm sure you like that expression. And the other thing also, the other reason she gives to explain why they behave in such a way is because it's our fault as Westerners. When they arrive here as migrants, they don't get good jobs, they don't have any money, they're socially and culturally excluded, and those men feel frustrated and angry, and this is the way to express that frustration. So
That's incredible.
It's because of the fact that we're racist, and because the fact that the porn industry is too present into what was spread in the Western world. So it's not their fault. They're kind of a victim of the West in a certain way.
You know, it's in English Canada and in the United States, Eric, the concept of rape culture by third-wave feminists is very prevalent. The front page story in Rolling Stone about an alleged mass rape in a college fraternity, the whole thing was fabricated. In Columbia University, a student who was walking around for a year with a mattress alleging she had been raped. Again, another fraudulent story. But the media is hypersensitive to what they call rape culture in North America. But here we have a real rape culture, and this columnist in La Presse is saying, no, and is making excuses for them that would never be allowed if we were talking about something in North America. Where are all the feminists, Eric? Where are all the people who claim to be against rape culture when we have a real rape culture?
You're absolutely right, Ezra. And not only that, the feminists are actually on the other side right now. The former president of the Fédération des Femmes du Québec, the Quebec Federation of Women, is currently in Germany. And she said it's terrible that the right is using what happened and all those rapes to promote racism, and we should be more understanding and open-minded. And no matter which religion or cultural background they come from, doesn't matter. A rape should be denounced, and we should not even mention the race or the religion of those who are the aggressors, because it's feeding discrimination and racism. So they're kind of stuck between the two. Are they going to defend the women that are raped, or are they going to defend the politically correctness of their ideology? And currently, obviously, they choose to be politically correct, and they decided to drop the victims and the women. It seems that they come second in this story.
Yeah, in the politically correct hierarchy, Islam trumps feminism for sure. Can you tell me the name of this columnist in La Presse? And here's why I'm curious, because her argument is very interesting. It says, well, you can't blame Muslims because their culture is this way and because. But in a way, she's saying, yeah, that's part of Islam, that's part of these Muslims, but we have to adjust. So in a way, she's confessing to it, but saying it's okay. If there is something inherently problematic with Muslim migrants, one would say the answer is, well, then don't let them in or screen them out or check for that. But if she's saying there's something culturally wrong with these people, but it's our fault, I mean, it sounds like she's arguing we'll keep bringing them in even if they're not a fit. She's actually conceding that there's a rape culture problem in Islam, isn't she?
Absolutely. Her name is Agnès Gruda, and in her paper today, she's quoting an author of an essay that was published lately by Shireen El-Faki. She wrote an essay called Sex and the Citadel, and that's what she's quoting from. She's an Egyptian author, and that's what she's quoting from, and that's where she got all those great ideas. And it's weird because today your researcher called me to talk about that case, and I just read that story a few minutes before she called, and I was outraged by the such statements. But unfortunately, on the left, it seems to be the dominant position right now.
Yeah. One last question for you, my friend. All of the things that we fought for decades and for centuries in the West, the equality of men and women, to criminalize rape, to not just rape, but sexual harassment and sexism, to allow people to be themselves, even if they're a little bit dissident or different. Let me ask you about gay rights, because there's an image I see from time to time coming out of the Islamic State of the Islamic State terrorists throwing men off the tops of apartment buildings. And in Iran, they're hung by the neck. And there's an anti-gay brutality. It's not just anti-female brutality, anti-gay brutality. And I don't see any questioning about these 50,000 Syrian migrants that are planned for this year, about whether or not they are willing to accept our Canadian values of mutual tolerance. Not just that we have to tolerate Muslims, but that Muslims from the most misogynistic, homophobic part of the world have to tolerate us too. And
you're absolutely right.
Where are the feminists? Where are the gay rights activists?
The gay rights activists are nowhere to be found, and you're absolutely right. Many gays are concerned about gay bashing coming back. Is that going to happen? And it's not fear, though. It's not, as you rightly pointed out, it's based on facts. There's a reason why. I remember a few years ago in Australia when they came out with those tests showing two men kissing each other, and we're asking people how they would behave if they cross people like that on the street. When somebody says that I'm going to kill him or I'm going to punch him, or I'm sorry, but that person cannot become a Canadian citizen. But unfortunately right now, the screening that is done with our migrants does not include such a question. And maybe that's something we should explore in the future as well.
Yeah. Eric Duhaime from FM 93 in Quebec, thank you so much for taking the time with us. Look forward to checking in again with you soon.
Always a pleasure, Ezra. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was Eric Duhaime, outstanding commentator, and he certainly has his finger on the pulse of Quebec. I look forward to checking in with him again soon. Stay with us after these short words. More on the Ezra Levant Show.
Secretary Clinton, you recently came out to say that all rape victims should be believed, but would you say that about Johnita Broderick, Kathleen Wiley, and/or Paula Jones? Should we believe them as well?
Well, I would say that everybody should be believed at first until they are disbelieved based on evidence.
Boy, she looked uncomfortable there. That was Hillary Clinton, the Democratic presidential candidate for the nomination of the Democratic Party, being asked at a town hall about 3 women who have accused with great credibility Bill Clinton of either raping or sexually harassing them. Boy, she looked uncomfortable talking about that. Joining us now via Skype to talk about Hillary Clinton and her problem with women and Bill is Roger Stone, a Republican strategist who's been working in that party for decades. He used to be with the Trump campaign, and now he is the author of 2 new books. One of them that's out in the market right now is called The Clintons' War on Women. And later this month, just to prove he's an equal opportunity critic, he has a book called Jeb and the Bush Crime Family. That's coming out too. 2 very controversial subjects. Mr. Stone, welcome to the show.
I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about the Bush-Clinton crime syndicate, because both these families are elites who have many dirty deeds behind them and the American people don't know about. And with both of them vying for the presidency, although Jeb's candidacy appears to be somewhat moribund, I think the American people need to know this is, as you know, a central question. The media is now asking, they asked Ben Carson in the debate last night, is Bill Clinton's sexual past fair game for this campaign? Well, it is, because it regards Hillary, who's an accessory after the fact in the cover-up of Bill's sex crimes. It's Hillary who hires the heavy-handed private detectives to terrorize Bill's victims into silence, into not testifying in response to a subpoena or not going public.
Hillary Clinton was able to turn these things to her advantage by making herself the victim. Oh, I'm the victim because Bill cheated on me, but I'm showing that I'm made of sterner stuff. I'll stand, resolutely, and I'll actually get sympathy because I was cheated on. But as you point out, cheating is one thing, but many of these women, you heard the 3 names there, Kathleen Wiley, Juanita Broderick, the other names escape me right now, but there's a whole list, including Paula Jones, for example, Jennifer Flowers, the list goes on. Some of those were consensual affairs. Monica Lewinsky is probably on the consensual side of things, although she was in a subordinate position, barely out of her teens.
Yes.
But in the actual cases of rape and assault, Hillary wasn't the victim. As you say, she was part of the cover-up as the 2 Clintons ascended to power.
Well, and whether she was whether the relationship with Lewinsky is consensual or not, it's Hillary who launches the Nuts and Sluts campaign from her East Wing office to destroy the credibility of Lewinsky, as if it is this 22-year-old's intern's fault that Bill, a veteran hound dog, has seduced her into giving him oral sex, as if that's her fault. Her character is disparaged. The fact that she's mentally destroyed, which is what they tried to do, saying that she was a stalker, that she was trash. So no, I think her role there is still significant. Yeah. Hillary is running the mop-up. Of that, there is no doubt.
Yeah. You know what's so interesting is that when Hillary Clinton launched her campaign, I mean, obviously her campaign's been going on for many years, but last year when it started to launch formally, in so many ways, she said, I mean, we're showing images of her at Emily's List right now, which is a feminist political organization to get women into politics. So many times she said, isn't it time we had a woman in the White House? That's really her chief campaign promise. I mean, she didn't have a track record of great legislative change when she was in the Senate. Her tour of duty as Secretary of State can only be called a disaster from Benghazi on. I mean, Benghazi merely being the most memorable of the disasters. Her campaign is, I'm a woman, so vote for me because I'm a woman. Donald Trump has brought back these issues. You used to work with Donald Trump. You're still friends with him. Donald Trump has brought back these things about Bill and Hillary Clinton in a way that no other conservative critic has been able to lay a glove on the Clintons in a decade. How has Trump been able to bring these issues back when no one else could lay a glove on the Clintons before?
The same reason, interestingly enough, that Trump was able to eject the Barack Obama birther issue, which was largely ignored by the mainstream press. Without getting distracted into a discussion about the birth of Barack Obama, you can't deny that issue reached the mainstream consciousness because Donald Trump used his celebrity, the fact that he was an A-list celebrity, to bring it up in the public arena. So it is with Hillary. So they play nice with the Bushes and the Rubios and the others inside the political class. Trump doesn't play nice. He plays to win. And he realizes, he knows Bill, he knows Bill's playmates. And he knows that Bill and that Hillary has facilitated and enabled and covered up Bill's actual crimes, as well as terrorizing women even when there is no crime, but because they might embarrass the Clintons. Hillary uses an army of thugs. She hires Jack Palladino. She hires Anthony Pellicano. She hires Ivan Duda. She hires Jerry Parks, all private detectives, heavy-handed guys who run terror campaigns. They slash tires, break windows, break into homes, leave bullets on the seats of the car, strangle pets, leave them on the front doorstep or the back porch, pardon me.
These are very tough accusations you're making. I have not read your book. I've read summaries of it and I've read reviews of it. I have not read it, so I have not examined your book. You're saying very dramatic things here. Do you cite evidence? Do you cite sources for the dramatic things you've just said?
Yes. I mean, look, the book has 300 pages of source notes and probably 587 footnotes. I ask, yes, I'm a partisan. I'm not a fan of Hillary. I admit this. But the mainstream media has missed this story. There's been 157 biographies of the Clintons, and they have missed the story, a true story of rape, sexual assault, cover-up, lies, strong-arm tactics, greed, drug use, drug trafficking, murder, and duplicity, and really epic greed. I mean, just incredible, epic corruption and greed.
Does your book deal with the Clinton foundations and the millions of dollars they received from places like Qatar and other Arab
states? The Clinton Foundation is not a charity. The Clinton Foundation is a slush fund for grifters. It's a vehicle for the facilitation of multi-million-dollar bribes. It is a pay-for-play cesspool. Chelsea Clinton is the chief operating officer. If you pay, you play. Foreign nations and companies and shady individuals are buying influence at the Clinton State Department. This is what the missing emails would show if they hadn't been destroyed. The nexus between the Clinton State Department and the Clinton Foundation. And therein, I think, lies the crux of the corruption.
Huma Abedin, I see that the same courts that have ordered Hillary Clinton to disgorge emails that she had thought she had deleted permanently have ordered that I think if I'm recalling the number, 29,000 emails from Huma Abedin, who is Hillary Clinton's closest aide and advisor. The 29,000 pages of her emails will be released. What do you suspect we'll see in those emails?
Well, they could potentially be a bombshell, or perhaps Huma is smart enough not to put certain things in writing. Look, there are very strange things here. Huma Abedin has deep ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. Her parents are adherents to the Muslim Brotherhood. Her brothers are adherents to the Muslim Brotherhood. She is the editor of a journal in college that is funded by the Muslim Brotherhood's founder. How she has a security clearance is amazing to me. She has seen top secret documents and classified documents in Hillary's email feed. She's allowed, as no one else has, a special waiver to collect another paycheck at Teneo, which is a lobbying firm, a Clinton-connected lobbying firm where Bill is secretly representing foreign nations for big dollars. The only president in history who's been willing to do that. Not Jimmy Carter, not Richard Nixon, not Lyndon Johnson. No president went on the payroll of a foreign power and sold his ex-presidency like Bill Clinton. And then Huma is allowed to grab a third paycheck from the $2 billion global fraud that is the Clinton Foundation. Now, if you've read Peter Schweizer's epic book, The Clinton Cash, it is written up till that time. We now know so much more about this what may be the largest organized crime swindle in American history. The Clintons are sucking money out through foreign entities where there is no transparency, so they set up satellite charities where they don't have to report things.
Let me ask you about
the coffers are really open with illegal dollars. The Clinton Foundation filings at the IRS and in the states are permeated with fraud. Several state attorney generals, Republicans, are looking into investigating. So this is going to develop as a very significant issue.
Incredible. Roger Stone, you've been extremely generous with your time. So interesting, very controversial. You acknowledge that some of your thoughts are speculation, but you do tell me you have hundreds of footnotes. I will read your books because you have been too tantalizing for me not to. I've enjoyed our conversation even without the benefit of having read it. I thank you so much for your time, sir.
I appreciate it, and I apologize for our delays. It's been great to be with you.
No problem. Thank you so much. That's Roger Stone. Folks, stay with us. After the break, your viewer mail.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
My favorite part of the show is your viewer feedback. Serge writes about Muslim rapist Walid Mustafa Chaloub, who says, actually, that news appeared in Journal de Montréal on page 20 as a fait divers. See attached PDF. I don't read other papers. They are too multicultural for me. Hey, you know what fait divers means in English? It means pretty much odds and ends. It means diverse facts. So the story of the worst serial rapist in Montreal and how long, the most grotesque crime in that city since what? Luca Magnotta. It's just in little odds and ends, places we don't really have any room for in the news pages. That's what Serge is saying. There it is in fait divers. Ruth writes that we should cover Russia's top boss in a different way. I'm an admirer of Vladimir Putin. He declared publicly in about 2007 that Russia would be a voice for traditional family values. Since then, they have banned violent Muslim books, scrambled access to major porn sites, and made the country GMO food-free. His position on ISIS makes sense, but it seems that you join with the left in hating Putin. Is this an informed opinion? Please give Putin another chance or take a few moments to explain to me. I'm willing to hear, or point me to an article that explains why Trudeau needs to stand up to Putin. Well, that's an interesting grab bag of things, some of which I factually dispute. I do not believe some of the reports you say about what Putin has or has not done, for example, in regards to GMO foods. I don't believe in censoring the internet, even for pornography, which obviously I don't recommend, but I believe that the risk of the government censoring the internet is a greater risk than the risk of freedom. And of course, with Vladimir Putin, he's not just censoring pornography. I would agree with one thing you say, which is that Vladimir Putin has taken a much more serious military approach to dealing with the Islamic State terrorists than Barack Obama or even Canada or any other NATO ally has. And in his dealings with Turkey, I hate to say it, I tend to side with Putin over our so-called NATO ally of Turkey. But I cannot abide Russia's crackdown under Putin of civil liberties in Russia itself, nor his invasion of countries like Georgia and Ukraine. So I'm sorry, we're on different sides on this one. Aaron writes, I'm sorry to be such trouble, but according to this video, the host Ezra Levant calls the captured military personnel Marines, but they are not Marines, they are U.S. Navy sailors. It infuriates me each time he calls them Marines. I am a Marine, and I know that my Marine brothers wouldn't apologize to the Iranians or any other foreign military. I know it was a small mistake, but please don't shame my brothers like that. We are not the Navy, we are Department of the Navy, the men's department. I love the YouTube channel, keep up the good work. Okay, well, thank you for writing, by the way, and thank you for staying true. That's what Semper Fi means, I know that. I originally wrote Navy sailors, but when I tried to investigate who operated these vessels, these riverine boats, in my quick online research in the hour or so I had before I had to record this breaking news, I found that they were described as Marines. So if they were sailors, I accept your correction, but I actually spent some time trying to figure out, were these sailors of the Navy or Marines in literal attack ships? Literal means close to the shore. So I'll look into it some more, but I think they were Marines. Your point, though, about the one military person, was sailor or Marine, saying, so sorry to Iran, they've been wonderful hosts, we were wrong, saying all those self-abnegating things about himself, his crew, and America. That is contrary to the U.S. military code that applies to all branches of the U.S. Armed Forces, where captured personnel are supposed to say only their name, rank, and serial number. I found it disconcerting, and as I mentioned in my coverage, I thought he shouldn't have been so gregarious. I ascribed it to some sort of torture, but you might be right. Finally, let me just say, Joel Pollack, a friend from Breitbart News, his theory is the same as mine, that the only possible exception for the surrender of those well-armed riverine boats to the shoddy fishing boats, really, of the Iranian Navy, and the conduct of that person, whether it's a Marine or a sailor apologizing, the only theory that makes sense was that they were ordered to surrender. So if your commander-in-chief orders you to roll over and play dead, maybe he was following orders like a good Marine or sailor. All right, next letter. Carol and Richard Whalen write, my husband and I are great fans of the Rebel.media, and we are happy that you started producing your longer show. We are somewhat disappointed, however, with the topics that you cover each night, and would like it if you could spend less time on the Islamic problems. Also, although Alberta has huge problems that affect the entire country, and we want to hear about them, there are other provinces in Canada with their own serious problems, and we feel your coverage should be more balanced. All right, good point. Fair point. It's tough to choose the most important issue of the day each day. I think the past few weeks have been overwhelmed with stories of radical Islam in Europe and in Canada. I feel like we're in a war, which, of course, we are. It's called a jihad. How can you not talk about a war when you're in a war? I do talk about other issues, but like I say, I have to choose my most important stories of the day. I agree, I need to be attentive to other places, like Ontario and BC, not just Alberta. Luckily, we have other on-air talent, including here in Ontario. We have Faith Goldie and Brian Lilly, and we hope to add another person in Toronto and another person in Vancouver. I'm happy that you want more from us, and you want more from us on more topics. We're still not even 1 year old, and we have a lot of growing to do. I hope we can keep up and meet your demand for varied content in the months ahead. So I take your constructive criticism. Hey, what did you think of the show today? What did you think of Roger Stone? His interview went about 20 minutes. It was just so tantalizing. We cut it down for the program, but if you want to see the full uncut version, click below at the full version with Roger Stone. He's got so many facts. Now, some of them are sort of factoids, and some of them are almost facts, and he acknowledged that some of his theories are circumstantial, some of his comments are speculation. They have more freedom of speech in the United States under the First Amendment than we do up here. I think Roger Stone, if he lived under our censorship and defamation and human rights laws, would be a little more circumscribed in how he communicates, but it was a hoot listening to him. And I know enough about Bill and Hillary Clinton to know there are germs of truth about what he said. I don't know if I would go so far as to say that Chelsea Clinton is actually someone else's daughter, not Bill's, or if I would go so far as to use the word murder, and he was probably talking about Vince Foster, a former aide to Hillary Clinton. I won't go that far. But I don't think you need to go that far to make a devastating case against the Clintons, especially Hillary. I don't think you need to go that far to point out how she sold out American troops at Benghazi, how she has profiteered with her husband off donations from foreign governments and the Clinton foundations, about how she obviously had inside dealings in Arkansas when she made hundreds of thousands of dollars trading cattle futures. So many things that the Clintons did do, especially the sexual assaults and the rapes. You don't need to go the extra inch to accuse of murder or some of the other more colorful things. But on the whole, it was a fascinating and entertaining interview, at least from my point of view, with Roger Stone. What do you think? Do you think he got into too arcane details? Let me know your thoughts. Send me an email to Ezra@therebel.media. Give us your comments on Facebook or just in the Rebel comment section below. It's been a busy week. I look forward to a recharging weekend. Hope you do too. We'll see you on Monday. Keep fighting for freedom.